The calls to go nuclear are getting louder, saying you can't fight two nuclear powers, US and Israel, with just ballistic missiles. The conflict will increase the price tag for Iran. Total sanctions, maybe even military operations against Iran. That is a big fear on the part of the government.
Iran's ballistic missile attack on Israel is raising concerns of a wider regional war. We want to look at how Iran's economy is playing into current events. Djavad Salehi-Isfahani is a professor of economics at Virginia Tech University in the U.S., and he joins me now for more. Djavad, you've said before that sanctions have made Iran more extreme. Have they also eroded the country's ability or its willingness to make war?
Well, it's well known that Iran's economy has suffered under sanctions quite a bit. It has lost oil revenues, which has caused a big budget deficit. As a result, the government hasn't been doing the kind of investment that it has been doing to keep the economy growing. But despite that, last year and even last quarter in spring, the economy was growing. Inflation has been one of the biggest concerns for the government, and one of the reasons why I think it began a change in tack to take a different direction, because the promises that conservatives in Iran had made, which is if we don't deal with America, we can bring inflation down, we can restore currency balance, and we can bring economic growth, did not happen during the first 3 years of President Raisi. And I believe there was a change of heart, change of direction to try the global economy again, to try to find a way to do trade and to bring in foreign capital and so on. And that obviously is not going well as of yesterday because of the intensified war. But the economy is in trouble, but it has not been sliding the way people think it has.
We have the impression that oil sales are incredibly critical for the government in this sanctions era that Iran is in right now. Is that true? And also, does it make it then more vulnerable if the economy is so one-dimensional to a possible conflict?
Yeah, that's an excellent question. It's true, because Iran is an oil exporter and has been kind of even oil-rich in the past. Tax collection is very bad. So the government still, after 10 years of sanctions, depends heavily on oil exports. And Iran is exporting perhaps 1 million barrels per day, is earning maybe 30 billion, 40 billion from that. As a result of the cut in oil exports, which has been basically halved when Trump exited the JCPOA. Before that, Iran was for a couple of years doing very well, growing at 13% per year. But then after Trump's exit, things have gotten very bad for the government. And that's why it has a big budget deficit. It prints money. Until a few months ago, inflation was running at over 40% annual rate. So yes, the government's going to have difficulty if the war extends beyond these aerial attacks, if there is conflict in the Persian Gulf. So its oil exports are affected, if its shipping lines are cut, that is going to cause considerable difficulty for the government.
We often hear how Iran funds militant organizations like Hamas and Hezbollah. Do we have any idea how that funding has changed at a time of tighter sanctions and more economic issues?
It has probably gotten tighter to pay, but I doubt Iran was spending a whole lot of money on these alliances. Its most expensive ally was Hezbollah. I had heard, there are no published data, and people tend to exaggerate things sometimes, was that maybe 100 million had been allocated to Hezbollah, which probably runs a lean organization. And now we don't know rebuilding of Lebanon, whether Iran will be called upon to support that. But what I see now, as in the last 24 hours, is that instead of the price tags going up, it's the political price that's gone up. Iran almost was forced into this retaliation against Israel because its allies like the Houthis and the Syrians and others, and the smaller units in Iraq, were feeling like Iran was going to easily abandon everyone when its new strategy of getting close to the West was coming online. And it had to prove that it still is a leader of the resistance group. I think that was the logic for doing the attack. I doubt very much Iran is seeking conflict with Israel. It knows that conflict with Israel is conflict with the West, especially with the United States. It's got a fragile economy. It's got problems socially. And I think Iran is a lot more interested in being a kind of a healthy Islamic republic rather than having regional hegemony or fighting the United States and Israel.
$100 million, you said, is a figure that Hezbollah has put on the funding that Iran has given it, I think, in years past. That may not be a lot of money relative to the Iranian budget, but it sounds like a lot to anyone else. Can we really tell if there's any sort of public backlash or public frustration over this kind of spending at a time when belts are tightening everywhere else?
Well, that's a very good question. I'm sure you will not be surprised when I tell you that there has been this tension inside Iran. The tension is carried at the street level, where people chant, give up on Gaza, give up on Lebanon, give me back my country. That's a chant that you have heard in the streets. It is also carried out at the level of debate in the newspapers and in the social media, where Iranians don't know exactly how much is spent, and they don't really know what the benefits are. And at this point, there are a lot of voices that say, well, Hezbollah has always been a burden on Iranian budget, but it can't really help Iran at time of its needs, military needs. And depending on what happens in the next few weeks, I think that question may go one way or the other. Maybe more Iranians will become frustrated with the Iranian foreign policy of building this resistance group at some cost, which not just diverts budget money away from Iranian needs to abroad, but also puts Iran in a cast of an outlaw country in conflict with the West, which prevents foreign investment, which prevents Iranians bringing their money back.
Could this tension over Iranian support of militant groups alternatively make a nuclear option or the pursuit of a nuclear weapon more attractive for Iran, that has to decide where its resources are going to go when it looks at its own defense, its own proxy militias?
Yes, indeed. I hear a lot more voices, people saying you can't fight two nuclear powers, US and Israel, with just missiles, ballistic missiles, although they did work well this last time. So the voices to get out of NPT and then in a hurry build a bomb, no one really knows how long that will take. It probably takes at least 6 months to a year. And then Iran is not going to be a heavily armed nuclear power. It's going to have one or two. So the calls to go nuclear are increasing. The voices are getting louder. However, the Supreme Leader has been firm that that's not to our interest. And I think the arguments on that side are also very strong. It's not at all clear that Iran gains a whole lot by building one nuclear weapon and at the cost of total sanctions, maybe even military operations against Iran. It's quite possible that the UN will come back in with its own sanctions, which empowers members to hurt Iranian forces, Iranian shipping, and so on. That is a big fear on the part of the government. The snapback of UN sanctions. US sanctions, Iran has found a way to live with and evade and so on. But the UN sanctions are a different story. Right now, they're suspended because of the JCPOA, for whatever that agreement was worth. It is working. And Iran is intent on not going back there again. I don't know if the current conflict is going to make it easier for the U.S. to bring Iran back to under UN sanctions or not. But that's one of those uncertainties that has now gone up hugely after the Iranian attack on Israel.
All right, that's Djavad Salehi-Isfahani with Virginia Tech.